Picture this. It's 1932. Australia is in the grip of the Great Depression, and the government has just declared war. But this isn't a war against another nation. It's a war against birds. Specifically, 20,000 emus that had invaded Western Australia's farmlands. This is the story of the Great Emu War, a 3-month military campaign that would become one of Australia's most embarrassing defeats and one of nature's most unexpected victories. The setup: Depression-era desperation. To understand how Australia ended up at war with large flightless birds, we need to go back to 1932. The Great Depression had hit Australia hard, and nowhere was this more apparent than in the wheat belt of Western Australia. Farmers who had expanded their operations after World War I were now struggling to survive as crop prices plummeted. These farmers, many of them ex-soldiers who had been given land grants after the war, were facing financial ruin. But their problems weren't just economic, they were ecological. Every year, around October, massive flocks of emus would migrate inland from the coast to their traditional breeding grounds. These birds, standing up to 6 feet tall and weighing 130 pounds each, had been making this journey for thousands of years. But now, instead of vast stretches of wilderness, they encountered something new: thousands of acres of cultivated wheat fields. To the emus, this was like discovering an all-you-can-eat buffet. They would descend on the crops in enormous numbers, devouring entire fields and trampling what they couldn't eat. The birds would also break through fences, allowing rabbits, another agricultural pest, to invade the farms. The situation was desperate. Farmers were losing entire harvests, and with Depression-era prices, they couldn't afford these losses. They had tried everything: scarecrows, poison, shooting parties. Nothing worked against the sheer numbers involved. Some estimates put the emu population in the region at over 20,000 birds. The political solution. Faced with mounting pressure from the farming lobby, the government decided to take unprecedented action. The Minister of Defense, Sir George Pearce, authorized what would officially be called a military operation against the emus. This wasn't just pest control, this was war. The man chosen to lead this unusual campaign was Major Gwyneth Purvis Wynne Aubrey, a decorated World War I veteran. Meredith was given command of a small force: 2 soldiers, 2 Lewis machine guns, and 10,000 rounds of ammunition. The plan seemed straightforward: use military efficiency and firepower to quickly eliminate the emu threat. The operation was even given media coverage, with government officials confident that modern military tactics would make quick work of a bunch of birds. How wrong they would be! Operation begins. Early encounters. On November 2, 1932, Major Meredith and his men took their positions near Campion, Western Australia. The first encounter seemed promising. They spotted a flock of about 50 emus and managed to kill several with their first burst of machine gun fire. But then something unexpected happened. The emus didn't panic and scatter randomly like other birds might. Instead, they organized. The surviving birds quickly learned to associate the sound of vehicles with danger. They began posting sentries, individual birds that would watch for approaching trucks while the flock fed. When danger was spotted, the emus would scatter in small groups, making them much harder targets than the large flocks the military had expected to face. Even more frustrating for the soldiers was the emus' incredible resilience. These birds had evolved to survive in one of the harshest environments. They could run at speeds up to 30 miles per hour, and their thick feathers and tough skin made them surprisingly difficult to bring down even with machine gun fire. Major Meredith later reported that it took multiple direct hits to stop a single emu, and many birds that appeared to be fatally wounded would simply run away and likely survive. The soldiers found themselves burning through ammunition at an alarming rate, while the emu population remained largely intact. The guerrilla birds. As the operation continued, the emus demonstrated tactical awareness that would impress military strategists. They began avoiding open areas during daylight hours, feeding primarily at dawn and dusk when visibility was poor. They used the terrain to their advantage, disappearing into scrubland and emerging miles away. The birds also seemed to learn from each encounter. After the first week, they rarely gathered in large, vulnerable flocks. Instead, they moved in smaller, more mobile groups that could quickly disperse when threatened. Some groups even appeared to use decoy tactics, with a few birds drawing the soldiers' attention while the main flock escaped in another direction. Major Meredith's reports from this period read like dispatches from a conventional war, describing enemy movements, tactical adjustments, and resource expenditure. In one particularly telling report, he noted that his men had fired nearly 3,000 rounds, but had only confirmed about 50 emu casualties, a kill ratio that would be considered disastrous in any military context. Public relations disaster. News of the struggling military operation began to leak to the press, and the story captured public imagination both in Australia and internationally. Newspapers began referring to the campaign as the Emu War, often with barely concealed amusement. Journalists delighted in reporting the military struggles. Headlines like "Emus win battle against soldiers" and "Birds defeat army" appeared in papers across the country. The international press was even less kind, with British newspapers treating the whole affair as a colonial comedy. The situation became even more embarrassing when ornithologist Dominic Serventi commented to the press that the emus had employed guerrilla tactics and were winning the war. This quote would be picked up by newspapers worldwide, cementing the narrative that Australia's military had been outsmarted by birds. Tactical adjustments and continued failures. Faced with mounting criticism and dwindling ammunition supplies, Major Meredith attempted several tactical changes. He tried using vehicles to herd the emus into areas where machine gun positions could be more effective. This strategy had limited success, as the birds quickly learned to avoid areas where vehicles had been operating. The military also attempted to use local farmers as spotters and guides, reasoning that their knowledge of the terrain and emu behavior patterns would prove valuable. While this provided some tactical intelligence, it didn't significantly improve the operation's success rate. One of the most creative attempts involved trying to lure large numbers of emus to a specific location, using feed, then attacking the concentrated flock. However, the birds seemed to sense the trap and refused to gather in the numbers needed to make this strategy effective. By late November, it was clear that the operation was failing. The soldiers had expended most of their ammunition, and while they had killed several hundred emus, the overall population remained largely intact. Worse still, the birds were becoming increasingly difficult to locate and engage as they adapted to the military presence. The withdrawal. On December 10, 1932, Major Meredith received orders to withdraw his forces. The Great Emu War was officially over, and by any military standard, it had been a complete defeat. The final tally was sobering. Approximately 986 rounds of ammunition had been fired for every emu confirmed killed. In his final report, Major Meredith attempted to salvage some dignity from the operation, noting the exceptional resilience and tactical awareness of the emu forces. He recommended that any future operations would require significantly more resources and different tactics. However, no such operations were ever authorized. The farmers, meanwhile, remained largely unsympathetic to the military's difficulties. They had watched professional soldiers with modern weapons fail to solve a problem that rural communities had been dealing with for years. Many felt that the operation had been more about political theater than practical pest control. Aftermath and legacy. The immediate aftermath of the Emu War was largely embarrassing for all involved. The government quietly discontinued discussing the operation, and Major Meredith returned to more conventional military duties. The farmers went back to dealing with the emu problem using traditional methods: bounties, poisoning, and organized shooting parties. The key difference was persistence and local knowledge rather than overwhelming firepower. The story might have been forgotten entirely if not for its sheer absurdity. Over the decades, the Great Emu War has become a beloved piece of Australian folklore, representing both the country's unique wildlife challenges and its ability to laugh at itself. Today, the Great Emu War serves as a reminder that conventional military tactics don't always apply to unconventional problems. It's become a case study in how overcoming